There are moments in life when something deep within us begins to whisper, not loudly, not boldly, but quietly, persistently, a sacred unrest, a holy discontent. You feel it, not with the mind, but with the soul. It is the quiet ache that gnaws at you when the world is silent. It is the feeling you get when everyone else celebrates and you're staring at the ceiling, wondering why your heart still feels empty. You smile, you function, you serve, but inside there is something slowly dying. And yet we cling to it. We cling to habits that poison our purpose. We hold on to relationships that drain the very life we're begging God to restore. We make beds in graveyards, hoping that comfort will rise from decay. How strange it is that the very things which destroy us are often the things we guard most fiercely. Why is it so hard to let go of what is killing us? Why do we choose familiar pain over unfamiliar peace? Spiritual growth is not found in the safety of comfort zones. It is forged in the fire of surrender. But we have built altars to our wounds, worshipped our chains, and made idols out of our trauma. We pray for resurrection, all the while refusing to leave the tomb. You cannot ascend if your heart is shackled to things that belong to the valley. You cannot carry the weight of grace if your hands are still full of bitterness, ego, and fear. The truth, though painful, is clear. You cannot grow spiritually while still feeding what's killing you. Look back on your life. Think about how many times you begged for peace, for clarity, for spiritual renewal, while still entertaining chaos. How many times have you prayed for transformation while gripping tightly the very blade that keeps cutting your soul? Some things are not meant to be healed. They are meant to be buried. Some bridges are not meant to be crossed again, but burned so you never return. Some people are not your assignment, they are your test. And the test is not about how long you can endure them. The test is about whether you have the courage to release them. Letting go is not a loss. It is a sacred exchange. You release what is dead so that something alive can be born in you. You lay down the counterfeit so that the real blessing can take root. But you cannot walk into the light until you're willing to leave the shadow. It's not about running from pain. It's about choosing what kind of pain will shape you. The pain of staying stuck, or the pain of breaking free. The pain of people-pleasing, or the pain of becoming who God called you to be. The pain of dying slowly in silence, or the pain of rising boldly in truth. This is the threshold where many turn back. It's not the darkness that scares them, it's the responsibility of light. Because once you see clearly, you can no longer pretend you don't know. Once you hear truth echo in your soul, you can no longer claim ignorance. The burden of awareness is that it demands action. So let me ask you, what are you still holding on to that is killing you slowly? What has God been whispering to you about, but you keep postponing the release? What are you feeding that is feeding on you? Freedom does not begin with motion. It begins with a decision to stop breathing life into what God is asking you to bury. A decision to walk away not because you're weak, but because your strength is now sacred. A decision to say, no more. Not everything deserves a second chance. Not everything is meant to be revived. Not everything is holy just because it's familiar. If you desire to grow, truly grow, spiritually, emotionally, and eternally, then there will come a moment when you must choose. And that moment, dear soul, is now. You must surrender what feels safe but is spiritually poisonous. There is a peculiar comfort in the familiar, even when it's killing us. We are creatures of habit, and our souls, weary as they may be, will often cling to what we've known, simply because the unknown feels far more terrifying. But spiritual growth is never found in the arms of safety. It is born in the wilderness of surrender. The danger lies not in what is obviously evil, but in what appears harmless yet erodes the soul over time. It could be the friend who constantly belittles your spirit, but you tell yourself, "At least I'm not alone." It could be the habit that numbs your pain but also numbs your purpose. It could be the identity you've worn like armor, strong, in control, always agreeable, yet deep down it's suffocating the person God called you to be. These things feel safe, they've become part of your rhythm, but they are slowly draining the divine potential within you. They are spiritual poisons disguised as comforts, and as long as you hold them, there will always be a ceiling on your growth. Ask yourself, what are you still holding on to simply because it's familiar? Is it the fear of being alone that keeps you entangled with toxic company? Is it the fear of failure that keeps you from answering your higher calling? Is it the guilt of disappointing others that keeps you from finally choosing yourself? There is a subtle tyranny in the things we fear to release. They rule us quietly, and they justify their presence with lies that sound like wisdom. You'll never survive without this. What if nothing better comes? At least it's better than being alone. These are not the whispers of God. They are the whispers of fear dressed in the robes of logic. God calls us not into comfort, but into covenant, not into safety, but into sanctity. There are moments in your life where He will ask you to walk away, not because He wants you to suffer, but because He wants to set you free. He cannot elevate you while you are still anchored to what chains you. He cannot pour living water into a vessel that is already filled with poison. And here lies the true test of faith, not in how much we pray, not in how loudly we worship, but in how deeply we are willing to let go. Can you release what feels safe in order to receive what is sacred? Can you walk away from the familiar pain in order to embrace the unknown healing? You may cry, you may grieve, you may feel lost for a while, but in that sacred surrender, something powerful begins to stir. The soul, once bound by fear, begins to breathe. The spirit, once suffocated by old identities and toxic patterns, begins to stretch and expand. Letting go is not weakness. It is strength refined in fire. It is the heart saying, "Even if I tremble, I trust." It is the soul saying, "I want God more than I want comfort." And in that moment of holy defiance, something shifts in the heavens. You are not created to carry what poisons you. You are created to rise. And to rise you must release. Not all attachments are divine. Some are designed to distract you. There is a quiet tragedy unfolding in the lives of many, souls destined for greatness, bound by attachments that have nothing to do with destiny. These are not grand sins or obvious evils. No, they are subtler, more deceptive. They wear the mask of love, loyalty, opportunity, or familiarity, and yet, beneath that surface, they are carefully engineered distractions, pulling you ever so gently away from your spiritual path. Not every person who enters your life is heaven-sent. Not every relationship is covenantal. Some are mere interruptions, divinely permitted to test your discernment. Some people do not come to lift you higher, but to see if you're willing to settle for less. They echo your desires, but never speak to your destiny. They applaud your comfort, but they dull your calling. You see, one of the greatest threats to spiritual growth is not evil in its rawest form, but misaligned attachments that drain your energy, blur your vision, and dilute your faith. These attachments look like emotional lifelines, but they quietly become spiritual snares. They cloud your judgment, they occupy your mind, they mimic intimacy while building invisible walls between you and God. The danger is not only in who or what you are connected to, but in what those connections keep you away from. How many dreams have died because someone convinced you they were unrealistic? How many gifts have gone unused because someone told you they were unnecessary? How many prayers went unanswered because your heart was too entangled in distractions to receive divine direction? Ask yourself this: are the people around you pushing you toward your purpose or pulling you into their comfort zone? Do your conversations inspire you to grow, or do they numb you into stagnation? Are you being loved for who you are in God, or merely tolerated because you're convenient? Sometimes the enemy doesn't come with horns. He comes as a friend who keeps you too busy to pray, as a partner who convinces you that compromise is the price of love, as a goal that looks like success but slowly suffocates your spirit. Not all distractions are evil. They're simply not divine. To grow spiritually, you must learn to separate presence from purpose. Not everyone who stands beside you is meant to walk with you. Some are lessons, not lifelines. Some are chapters, not the whole book. The discernment to know the difference is a gift you must seek and a skill you must cultivate. God is not cruel when He removes certain people from your life. He is merciful. He sees what you cannot. He hears what they say when you're not in the room. He knows what they admire in public but envy in private. And when He pulls them away, it's not to punish you. It's to preserve you. But if you insist on holding on, if you fight to keep what He is trying to release, then the consequence is not theirs, it is yours. You remain spiritually stagnant. You remain emotionally burdened. And you delay the very breakthrough you've been praying for. Letting go of attachments that do not serve your soul is not betrayal, it is alignment. It is choosing truth over tolerance. It is choosing divine focus over emotional clutter. And when you make that choice, when you say, "I will no longer trade my peace for proximity," you begin to reclaim your life. Not the life others want for you, but the life you were born to live. You were not created to carry distractions disguised as loyalty. You were created to walk freely, boldly, and lightly toward your spiritual destiny. But to walk that path, you must cut the cords that keep you tied to things that were never meant to stay. Your future can't begin until your past is truly buried. There is a strange weight that many carry, not visible to the eye, but heavy on the soul. It's the burden of unfinished endings, of wounds left open, of memories that replay like an unbroken loop. And yet, with trembling hands and hopeful hearts, we ask God for a new beginning, while still tethered to the remnants of what should have been laid to rest. The truth is simple yet deeply unsettling. Your future cannot begin until your past is truly buried. Not ignored, not denied, not rewritten in comforting lies, but buried, mourned, released. Many are trying to plant seeds of purpose in the soil of their past pain, but nothing grows in ground that hasn't been healed. You cannot sow hope where bitterness still reigns. You cannot walk into tomorrow if yesterday still holds the keys to your peace. Spiritual growth demands that you confront the past, not to dwell in it, but to bury what no longer belongs in your story. Consider this: how many times have you returned to a memory not to learn from it, but to relive it? How often do you define yourself by what was done to you, instead of what God is calling you to become? The past, when left unresolved, becomes a shadow that follows you, even into the light. It clings to your identity, it colors your decisions, and most dangerously, it convinces you that because you were broken then, you are unworthy now. But that is not truth, that is spiritual sabotage. The past may explain you, but it must never define you. The people who hurt you, the mistakes you made, the seasons you barely survived, these are pages in the story, not the entire book. You were not meant to build a home in your history. You were meant to learn, to grow, and to move forward. And yet, why do we hold on? Why do we revisit graves, hoping the dead will apologize or the pain will somehow justify itself? Because pain craves meaning. Trauma seeks validation, and sometimes the past feels more real than the uncertain promises of the future. We cling not because we want to stay, but because we're afraid of what comes next if we truly let go. But God does not dwell in yesterday. He moves forward. He restores not by revisiting every wound, but by redeeming them through transformation. And for that transformation to occur, you must decide, once and for all, that the grave you keep visiting no longer deserves your presence. What does this burial look like? It looks like forgiveness, not for them, but for you. It looks like no longer defining yourself by your lowest moments. It looks like no longer trying to explain your worth to people who were never meant to understand it. It looks like releasing the narrative of victimhood and stepping into the identity of a survivor, a fighter, a chosen vessel for purpose. It is not denial, it is deliverance. Letting go of the past doesn't mean pretending it never happened. It means declaring that it no longer has the power to control what happens next. It means you stop bleeding on people who didn't cut you. It means you stop making decisions based on old fears and start making them based on present faith. There comes a sacred moment in every life when you must draw a line, not around your heart to protect it, but around your past to bury it. And once it's buried, don't go back with a shovel. Let what died remain dead, because until you do, the future you dream of, the spiritual peace, the emotional freedom, the divine alignment will remain out of reach, not because it isn't yours, but because your hands are still full of yesterday's ashes. You must free your hands to receive what's ahead. You must clear your heart to hold what's holy. You must bury the past so that the future can finally rise. God will not compete with the idols you refuse to tear down. There is a silence in heaven that feels unsettling. You pray, but there is no answer. You cry out, but the sky remains still. You search for God, and yet His presence seems distant. Could it be that the silence is not absence, but resistance? Could it be that the heavens are quiet not because God has left, but because your heart is already too full? God does not compete for space in a soul already occupied by idols. The word idol sounds ancient to modern ears. It conjures images of golden statues, temples, and long-forgotten rituals. But idols today wear different clothes. They're not made of stone, they're made of ego. They're not carved by hands, they're formed by choices. An idol is anything, anyone, that takes the place in your heart where God rightfully belongs. It can be a relationship you've elevated above obedience, a career you pursue at the cost of your soul, a version of yourself you're too proud to surrender. It can be the approval of people you silently worship, even as their opinions crush your spirit. It can be control, fear, money, image, anything you trust more than you trust Him. And here is the danger. God will not force His way in. He knocks, but He does not barge. He invites, but He does not compete. He waits, but He does not wait forever. Ask yourself, with courage and honesty, what have I built a throne for in my heart? What do I run to when I am afraid? What do I turn to when I feel lost? What do I cling to more tightly than I cling to God? We say we want breakthrough, but we won't break the idols. We say we want intimacy with God, but we hide rooms in our soul where He is not welcome. We say we trust Him, but only if He doesn't touch that relationship, that plan, that dream, that habit. But spiritual growth cannot happen on ground that is already claimed by other gods. And anything you place above God, even if it's a good thing, becomes a God thing. And a God thing will always fail you in the end, not because it wasn't real, but because it wasn't divine. Look at the moments in Scripture where God's presence retreated. It wasn't because He changed His nature, it was because His people changed their allegiance. When idols went up, the glory came down. When they worshipped the work of their own hands, they forfeited the blessing of His. This principle is unchanging. God does not share thrones, and when He asks you to tear down an idol, it will hurt. It will feel like losing a part of yourself. That's because it became too entangled with your identity. But God doesn't ask you to let go to punish you. He asks because He knows what you could become without the idol in the way. You cannot walk in the fullness of grace while bowing to the fear of man. You cannot step into your calling while still idolizing the opinions of the crowd. You cannot rise spiritually while still serving something that pulls you away from obedience. Tearing down an idol is not an event. It's a war between flesh and spirit, between what feels good and what is good, between temporary pleasure and eternal purpose. But in every idol you lay down, there is a deeper intimacy waiting. In every surrender, there is a stronger clarity. In every act of obedience, there is a new anointing. God does not leave empty what you clear for Him. He fills it with something better, something eternal, something alive. And once you've tasted that freedom, you will never again settle for the chains of counterfeit gods. Emotional healing requires spiritual amputation. There are wounds that time does not heal, scars that do not fade with distraction, pains that prayers alone cannot erase, not because God is not powerful, but because we are still holding on to what keeps us bleeding. Healing is not passive. It is not merely waiting for the ache to go away. Real healing, deep, soul-cleansing healing, requires something most of us are unwilling to do: amputate what is killing us spiritually. You cannot keep stroking the very thing that broke you and expect to be made whole. You cannot treat a spiritual infection with emotional bandages. Some attachments, some habits, some relationships, some patterns of thought must be cut off entirely for the soul to begin breathing again. This is not cruelty. This is divine mercy. There comes a point when the pain of holding on becomes more dangerous than the pain of letting go. Think of a limb infected with gangrene. The infection spreads slowly, quietly, eating life cell by cell. The body becomes weaker, poisoned from within. And yet, because the limb is part of the body, it's hard to imagine life without it. But what the patient must understand is this: if the limb is not removed, the body will die. The surgery is not punishment. It is survival. In the same way, there are emotional and spiritual connections in your life that have become toxic. They once had purpose. They once felt right. But now, they are decaying your joy, eroding your identity, and compromising your future. And instead of removing them, you've been justifying their presence. You say things like, maybe it'll change, maybe I can fix it, maybe I'm overreacting. No, you are not overreacting. Your soul is sending you warnings. Your spirit is crying for liberation. Your peace is suffocating beneath the weight of something you refuse to sever. Ask yourself with painful honesty, what am I still attached to that is harming my emotional health? What conversation am I repeating in my mind that never brings resolution, only more hurt? Who am I keeping close not out of love, but out of fear of starting over? Some people are like anchors disguised as lifelines. They pull you down, all the while convincing you they're keeping you afloat. Some habits feel like home because they've been there for so long, but in truth, they are prisons, keeping you from becoming the person you were created to be. Healing begins the moment you stop bargaining with what God is asking you to release. The moment you realize that closure is not required for freedom, that you don't need their apology to forgive, that you don't need their permission to leave, that you don't need their validation to know your worth. Sometimes healing is simply saying, I choose to walk away, bleeding, crying, shaking, but free. Amputation is violent. It will feel like you're tearing away a piece of yourself. But what if that piece was never truly you? What if that version of yourself was constructed from trauma, fear, and survival? And God is now calling you to shed that skin, to step into your authentic, healed identity. You were not made to live in pain. You were not made to repeat cycles. You were not made to merely survive. You were made to heal, to rise, to transform. But healing is not an emotional high, it's a spiritual discipline. It requires discernment, it requires courage, and above all, it requires sacrifice. You will grieve, you will doubt, you will feel alone. But let this be the truth you cling to. What you are letting go of was never your destiny. It was only a detour. And once you amputate what's keeping you sick, your soul will begin to regenerate. Your peace will return. Your clarity will sharpen. Your strength will rise. This is how healing works. Not through comfort, but through confrontation. Not by avoiding the wound, but by cleaning it out, no matter how much it stings. Not by holding on, but by letting go. Emotional healing demands spiritual decisions, and spiritual decisions require spiritual boldness. The boldness to say, I love myself enough to stop bleeding for people who don't care that I'm in pain. I trust God enough to remove what's killing me, even if I don't yet see what's next. This is the path few choose, but those who do, they are the ones who rise, not only healed, but whole. Letting go isn't losing, it's making space for the sacred. There is something sacred about emptiness, something profoundly spiritual about the space left behind when you release what no longer serves your soul. But for most of us, letting go feels like defeat. It feels like weakness, like abandonment, like failure. We mourn what we walk away from, as if it were the last source of love we will ever know. We mistake release for ruin. We confuse absence with lack. And we call it loss, when in truth, it's preparation. Letting go is not the end of something valuable. It is the beginning of something holy. You cannot grow spiritually while your soul is cluttered with what once was. A life filled with distractions has no room for divine whispers. A heart weighed down by the past cannot carry the gifts of the future. Sometimes God does not bring new blessings, not because He has none to offer, but because your hands are too full to receive them. Imagine holding onto a broken object, perhaps a vase, cracked and leaking, but once beautiful. You know it no longer serves its purpose. It cuts your hands every time you touch it, but you hold on, convincing yourself that it's better than nothing, that it's too painful to throw away. But the longer you carry it, the more it injures you. And the longer you delay its release, the longer you delay the arrival of something whole, something healing, something new. Letting go is not losing. It's clearing space. It's spiritual housekeeping. It's saying, this no longer reflects who I am or where I'm going. I release it with gratitude, and I welcome what God has for me next. But this truth is not easily accepted. It confronts our fear of the unknown. It confronts our need for control. It confronts the part of us that still believes the best is behind us, that there's nothing left to hope for. And that's the voice that must be silenced if you ever wish to step into spiritual growth. Ask yourself, what are you afraid to let go of because you can't imagine what life looks like without it? What emotional clutter is filling the sacred space where peace is supposed to live? What are you still calling a blessing, even though it has become a burden? Many of us pray for clarity, but refuse to clear the clutter. We ask for joy, but remain attached to what brings us pain. We beg for direction while staying loyal to what keeps us lost. But God does not shout over noise. His miracles do not thrive in chaos. The sacred requires silence, space, surrender. Letting go is not an act of desperation. It is an act of alignment. It says to God, I trust you more than I trust my comfort. I believe in what's coming more than I fear what's leaving. I want you more than I want them. And what you may not realize is this: God is not trying to hurt you with subtraction. He is trying to multiply your peace. He is not trying to leave you empty. He is trying to make room for overflow. The release is not the punishment, it is the preparation. You must make room for the sacred. You must tear down what was temporary so something eternal can take root. And yes, it will be hard. Yes, it will feel like loss. But spiritual maturity means learning to see the pain of letting go as a holy invitation, a call to deeper trust, a path to greater freedom. You cannot step into your divine identity while dragging bags of yesterday's expectations, failures, and disappointments. You cannot hold hands with your future while clutching the past. Letting go is the bridge between who you were and who you are becoming. And when you finally do it, when you unclench your fists and open your hands, you create space not just for blessings, but for transformation. You allow God to write new stories on the blank pages of your heart. You allow the sacred to take up residence in a space that used to be full of sorrow. So no, letting go is not losing. It's the sacred act of faith that makes room for what's truly yours. Growth begins where control ends, and trust begins control. Is a comforting illusion. It gives us the false sense that we are safe, that outcomes can be managed, and that life can be tamed if only we hold on tightly enough. We plan, we strategize, we grip tightly to people, routines, and expectations, not out of strength, but out of fear. Fear of loss, fear of uncertainty, fear that if we loosen our grip, everything will fall apart. But what if the very act of control is what's keeping us from the spiritual growth we long for? The truth is hard, but necessary. You cannot grow while clinging to control. You cannot rise while obsessing over outcomes. Spiritual growth begins the moment you lay down your illusions and place your faith in something higher than your own understanding. Control is the enemy of trust, and where trust is absent, faith cannot flourish. We often ask God to change our lives, to guide us, to heal us, to elevate us, but we hand him a script. We say, I want your will, but please let it look like this. I trust you, but only if it doesn't involve loss or discomfort. I surrender, but only partially. And then we wonder why we feel stuck, spiritually dry, unable to move forward. Because true transformation doesn't happen when you're in control. It happens when you're willing to release control. Letting go is not passive. It's not apathy. It's not giving up. It's an intentional, radical act of faith. It's the conscious decision to believe that God's plan, even when unclear, is better than your limited vision. It's saying, I don't have to understand everything to move forward. I don't need all the answers to obey. That's where growth lives. Not in certainty, but in surrender. Ask yourself, what are you afraid will happen if you let go? What outcomes are you still trying to force in your own strength? Where in your life have you been trusting your plan more than God's process? The most fertile soil for spiritual growth is found in the place where pride dies and humility takes root. When you admit, I don't have all the answers, and I can't fix this on my own, the heavens begin to move. That's not weakness, it's wisdom. And it's exactly where you need to be for transformation to begin. Imagine a seed buried in the earth. It doesn't control the rain, it cannot schedule the sunlight. It doesn't dictate the pace of its own growth, but it trusts the process. It stays rooted, and in time, something miraculous begins. What was once hidden begins to rise. What was buried becomes fruitful, but only after surrender. Your life is no different. You are not called to control everything. You are called to walk by faith. And faith doesn't always make you feel safe. Sometimes it asks you to walk on water. Sometimes it leads you through valleys. Sometimes it requires you to stay still while everything around you feels like it's falling apart. And yet, in those very moments, the soul expands, the roots deepen, the heart aligns with heaven. Control may offer the illusion of stability, but trust offers the reality of peace. One exhausts you, the other renews you. You see, growth doesn't come from knowing what's next. It comes from trusting the one who knows what's next. It comes from waking up every day and saying, God, I don't know where this is going, but I trust you with the journey. That trust becomes the foundation of something unshakable, something eternal. And that's the kind of growth no storm can destroy. So if you feel like you're being stretched beyond your comfort zone, if you're standing at the edge of something you don't fully understand, if everything inside you wants to hold tighter, but something deeper is whispering, let go. Listen, because that moment is sacred. It's the doorway to something greater. It's the place where control ends and trust begins and growth becomes inevitable. So here you are, standing at the edge of your old life, staring into the unknown. Everything in you wants to go back, to cling, to preserve what's familiar. But something deeper, something eternal is whispering, let it go, all of it. This moment is not meant to destroy you. It's meant to awaken you. The pain you've carried, the chains you've justified, the people you've begged to stay, the habits you've hidden in your heart. None of it belongs in the life God is calling you to build. You were not created to survive in spiritual starvation while feeding things that deplete you. You were not born to carry what's killing you. You were chosen to rise. Yes, letting go will hurt. Yes, there will be silence, grief, and moments of terrifying stillness. But beyond that stillness, beyond that grief, is clarity. There is peace. There is God. And He's not asking you to leap alone. He's already gone ahead of you, preparing the path, healing what you haven't even begun to speak of, restoring what you thought would be forever broken. The old season is done. The old pain has taught you enough. You do not need to keep rehearsing it in your mind to prove you survived. You did. You're here. You're ready. But now is the time to shed the weight, to break the ties, to surrender the control, and to finally trust the one who's been calling you into something deeper all along. Let go, not because you are weak, but because what comes next is sacred. Let go, not because it didn't matter, but because it no longer does. Let go not into emptiness, but into divine fullness. This is not the end. This is the becoming, and everything begins with the courage to release. Now breathe in peace, breathe out the past, and walk forward. Heaven is waiting for your yes.